A pleasure to welcome
Thank
Dr.
you.
Debbie Akerman, who is a professor at Wurzweiler of Yeshiva University. Her expertise, her PhD, was on addiction and the Orthodox community. She is the mother of 11 biological children and 8 chosen children. And we had the pleasure of meeting her a couple of years ago at our medical ethics conference. And it's a pleasure to welcome her back. She spoke last year and this year. Bakasha, Dr. Ackerman.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon to everybody. I know this has been an incredible morning with an unbelievable lineup, so I appreciate everybody who's being here. And I really wanted to first start by thanking Rabbi Jay and Mrs. Alana Kelman. This is really an unbelievable opportunity. It's always an unbelievable pleasure and honor to work with Rabbi Jay and Alana Kelman. I know they pour their heart and soul, tons of time and energy into continuing to be machazek and to educate and to help our klal. And it's they're amazing people. This is truly wonderful for me. I also wanted to express my gratitude being part of it's really incredible lineup. The speakers, every single speaker I have either worked with or heard or both heard or worked with. And one of my friends left me a message. They said, "Oh my gosh, I saw the flyer. What an unbelievable lineup. What are you doing there?" I'm like, thank you. Okay, so we all have to have our friends that keep us humble and grounded. But really, Yashar Koach, really what an unbelievable morning to put together at this time. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of our own man-made enemy, and that's the enemy that we have created of judgment and stigma and injustice. And I'm actually kind of hoping that by the end of my presentation, people will be uncomfortable. When we are uncomfortable, that's when our brains are kind of telling us we're doing a little work, we're thinking, we're feeling, we're mulling things over, and that's where the roots and the seeds of change take hold. And so I do hope that there is discomfort. I also would like to leave everybody with just some maybe really practical, easy tools to stick in your toolbox or stick in your bag and things that we can employ to try to enact that discomfort and change that I hope that we will feel. I want to start today with a story about my own grandmother. Uh, my own grandmother was what I call a diminutive powerhouse. She was barely 5 feet tall. And she used to tell me all the time that I'm her favorite. I actually told everybody that all the time that I was her favorite. And that was really special to me. And my relationship with my grandmother was something that really sustained me through a lot of my own life. My grandmother was born when Europe was still called the Habsburg Empire. It's really, incredible to know somebody that came from Europe at that time. She lived through World War I and World War II. She lived through the Nazis and the communists. She was an incredibly rich, aristocratic European woman who ended up washing floors to support her family. She saw the creation of the State of Israel, the War of Independence, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, everything that Israel went through to kind of make it and survive. She also witnessed other world tragedies, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, multiple things that happened in the world, not to mention her own countless health issues that she battled and being predeceased by her own son and 2 of her son-in-laws. So when 9/11 hit, I wasn't a social worker, I wasn't a therapist, I was a mommy, with my own big brood, kind of working through my own personal battle. But I called my grandma, although she was 91 years young and incredibly with it. This was a worldwide tragedy, 9/11, and I just wanted to make sure that she was okay. My mother was traveling with a stepfather at that time, and yes, we had family. I'm from Detroit, but I just wanted to see how grandma was doing. And so I called my grandma. I said, "Grandma, how you doing? This is really kind of upsetting to everybody." And I'm never going to forget what my grandmother said to me in her beautiful German, Romanian, Hungarian, whatever accent the Habsburg Empire, imbued in her, really mostly German. She said to me, "The world is undergoing such complicated times." And then she paused and said, "Again, again." It was almost like a plaintive request, like a request for the world to kind of get their act together and finally make some change, make a change that would stick. Why are we doing this again? Why are we dropping bombs and people are being killed? And why again, this is a woman who was around for World War One. She just, again, why are we doing this to each other again? And our world today is going through complicated times again. But I'm really not referring to the complicated events that maybe you are thinking. I know, and we all know, that our reality, until the final redemption and the coming of the Mashiach, may it be soon, is that Jewish blood has always and will always be cheap. Just our reality that we face. Maybe today I'm thinking it's still cheap. It's just not quite as silent as it has been in the past. Social media, there are voices. We're talking, we're screaming, we're protesting. Jewish blood is still cheap according to the world, but at least now we're standing up and we're saying, you know what? It may be cheap, but it's not going to be quiet because here we are. But I'm kind of talking to a man-made enemy that lurks, unfortunately, in our community. And now I'm in a little bit of a conundrum. How am I supposed to speak about stigma and judgment in our community without sounding judgmental myself? Something that I've been kind of mulling over all morning. How am I going to do this? Well, I want to answer by sharing the following. I work for an organization called MASK, Mothers and Fathers Alliance Saving Kids, and this group put together a mental health mission to Israel 3 weeks ago, and I participated. This trip to me was unbelievably transformative. We were privileged to meet with representatives from United Hatzalah. We met with the incomparable Dr. Danny Brum, who spoke, unbelievable, and thank you. We met from representatives of the Forum for Hostage Families. We went and met with soldiers who have no limbs and some limbs at Tel HaShomer. We went to Nativ HaAsara and spoke to people who had survived the massacre there. And we went to Nova and spoke with survivors there. It was a painful and powerful and poignant trip that I would do absolutely again and again and again. And I'm a trained therapist, and I spend my day with my words. My words are very important to me because that's the only thing I have as a therapist. And I spent the entire week not able to utter a word. The only thing I could do was walk around from place to place, meeting person after person, and just saying, may I please have a hug? May I please just hug you? Was the only thing I was able to do. The resilience and strength of the Jewish people, the resilience and strength of the people of Israel is absolutely nothing short of a miracle. I adore our community, and I just want to be helpful in any way that I am able. So the purpose of this presentation is not to appear judgmental. That would be counterproductive at best and incredibly hypocritical. It's rather to try to understand, why do we judge? What is it about us that we have this quality where we do judge people? And what can we do to kind of fix this problem? So according to an article by the editorial team of Neural Launch in September 2024, judgment is here every single day of our lives. These kind of subtle eye glances that we do, those eye rolls, or as the Kotzker Rebbe once said, you can even speak Lashon Hara with your nose, right? You kind of crinkle your nose up at someone and they immediately know that you're not so incredibly fond of them. Or outright criticism. Many of us are just quite blunt with what we want and have to say. According to this article, this erodes our relationships. It stifles our personal growth. It is the silent killer of connection. It is the thief of joy and an unwelcome guest at any social gathering. And it is, the article states, as common as our morning coffee. Judgment appears to be inborn in all of us. And there is a theory that it's actually used as a survival technique. Is this person safe? Can I trust this person? Other explanations about judgment is that it makes us feel better about ourselves, quite frankly, right? We're not really them, and look at them, and we're actually better than that. It's projection. Projection is a defense mechanism where we attribute our own negative feelings and emotions to other people. And this alleviates guilty feelings that we have. This could take the form of criticizing people to mitigate our own low self-esteem. In my work with people with addiction, that's my clinical specialty, we talk about a concept called rigorous honesty in all of our affairs and our emotions. And that is one of the keys to recovery. One of the basic tenets of the 12-step movement is actually based on the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. And that is, if you point two fingers at someone else, always be aware that 3 come right back at you. According to Dr. Elizabeth Dorrance Hall, who's an assistant professor of communication at Michigan State University, we have what we call attributions. And attributions are what we think about others in the world, and we use them to make sense about what other people do. How come you did that? And how come I did that in response to what you did? And these are thoughts that human beings go through dozens and dozens of times every single day. Dr. Hall identifies 2 types of attributions that we use. The first is situational attribution, and the second one is called a personality attribution. In a situational attribution, we assume that a person acts a certain way because the situation around them. The worker that we're working with, our coworker, is crabby. Oh, yeah, probably tired. God knows they're overworked, they're underpaid. It's the situation that's making them act in that way. But a personality attribution refers to someone's actual personhood or their personality. We assume that the person is being mean and ornery because they're just really not a very nice person. And that is what we call a personality attribution. Personality attributions are much more long lasting. And Dr. Hall further states that research shows us that we as individuals always underestimate the situational attribution and tend to focus much more on the personality attribution, especially when it's someone that we don't even know well. This rampant and pervasive personality attribution behavior leads to something that we call stigma. According to Nifton, stigma is a combination of inaccurate or distorted beliefs. It's negative attitudes and a discriminatory behavior, which includes stereotyping and separation of us versus them. And stigma will lead to social injury. Taking a 30-second commercial break because I just noticed my former student Shmuel is here. Thank you, Shmuel, one of my wonderful prize students, and thank you so much for being here. I did just signal you out, but not in a stigma way, in a positive way. So there you go. Okay. Yay, Shmuel. Okay. Stigma is more often than not perpetuated on those that have less power than us. And it comes in several forms, which can be described as a negative attitude or idea about a mental, about a physical, or a social feature of a person or a group. Stigma is always going to lead to social disapproval. Stigma and shame are also heightened in communities that are seen by society as having higher moral standards. So a community that holds itself to a higher moral code, a community that actually prides itself on being better than others, ironically, will have higher rates of stigma. And we know that there are different types of stigma. The first one is called internalized stigma, and that is just going to the affected individual. Social stigma is felt in everyday interactions with the family, the friends, and the wider community. And structural stigma is prejudice that we find in systems like the legal system, the business systems, media, and culture. As a mental health therapist, and I work with mental health and my clinical specialty is addiction, stigma is very detrimental. Stigma will actually cause people not to go into treatment. The constant fear of being rejected and the stress that exacerbates that will actually make the initial diagnosis worse. Additionally, when we discuss stigma as it applies to mental health, there is the idea that individuals with mental health issues and addiction are always dangerous. And more importantly, that they are somehow to blame for the conditions of which they suffer. In a study by Corrigan, individuals that have drug addiction are constantly being judged as being responsible for their addiction. Additionally, 25 to 50% of family members believe that the relationship with someone in their family with mental illness should be hidden. It shouldn't be known that we have a relationship with them. And it is a source of great shame. And half the participants in Corrigan's studies who were mothers reported that they harbored a great fear of being blamed for their child's mental illness or addiction. I have thought a lot about judgment. As somebody who professes and tries to lead my life according to 12-step philosophy, 12-step has taught me this wonderful saying of a God moment, a moment where the hand of God is just so clear, these God moments that we can find throughout our day. And so I wanted to find something in the Parsha that we just finished regarding judgment. And so I opened my email and I came upon a beautiful explanation from the Parsha we just finished by our very own Rabbi J. Kelman. It's your turn, Rabbi Kelman. Here you go. This is just, but bear with me. This is absolutely so beautiful. I actually woke my husband at 1 a.m. last night to read this to him. I'm like, you got to hear this. This is just absolutely gorgeous. Rabbi Kalman writes, there are garments that we are supposed to make for the Kohanim, a breastplate, an ephod, which is a type of cape. I didn't know that, a robe, a quilted undercoat, a mitre, and a girdle. And they're going to be made, these holy garments, by Aaron, his brother, and his sons, that he may minister with them in the priest's office. Rabbi Kalman then lets us know, and I'm glad to know this, that the worldwide clothing industry is a $2 trillion industry that employs some 300 million people. I am part of that industry. 2 o'clock in the morning online shopping is one of my favorite activities. So I am definitely contributing to the 2 trillion industry worldwide. I'm definitely an active contributor. Thank you, Rabbi Kalman, for letting me know my part. Clothes are very important to so many people and a livelihood for many. We all wear different types of clothes for different occasions, and special occasions require special clothing. When we meet an important person or in a formal setting, we try to dress for success and dress for the occasion. There's no more formal activity, writes Rabbi Kalman, in our Jewish tradition than the sacrificial rites. There are details and details that have to be followed to the letter, or the service is considered not valid. There's a reason the Torah spends 5 parshiot, which detail the construction of our Mishkan. And part and parcel of this service are the special clothes that have to be worn by those who serve in the temple, the Kohanim. And this is what we learn about in this week's Torah reading. Rabbi Kalman teaches us that the Kohanim wore 4 pieces of clothing: breeches, a tunic, a belt, and a turban, with the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, adding 4 additional pieces: the robe, the ephod, the breastplate, and the headband, that were all layered with gold. Being that much of the service of the Mishkan served as an atonement for the sins of the Jewish people, it's not surprising that our Chachamim saw the clothes of the Kohanim as a way to facilitate this atonement. The first of these garments is the choshen, the breastplate, which is described as a choshen mishpat, the breastplate of judgment. This breastplate had the potential to atone for the sin of a miscarriage of justice. Rabbi Kalman, am I doing this justice? Your beautiful Devar Torah, right?
You're the best PR I've ever had. Thank you very much.
It was such a God moment. I'm like, oh my God, a choshen mishpat, an actual garment to atone for our sin of misjudgment. Rabbi Kelman continues to say the choshen is the first garment mentioned, which obviously means that miscarriage of judgment is the first and primary sin that we actually have to atone for. We are informing our reader and our listener that we are going to choose Avraham as our father because he is going to teach his children tzedakah and mishpat, justice and righteousness. This is what we are about. Moshe not only listened to this, but 40 years as he prepares to enter Eretz Yisrael, He begins his discourse of emphasizing the need to choose proper judges for our nation, people who will never show favoritism, who will recognize the need for justice even when the amount is incredibly small, people who will not fear or be influenced by any man, but will only stand in the service of Hashem. And the miscarriage of justice comes at a great price. The sword will come to the world for the delay of judgment, and perversion of justice, as our Chachamim noted, is akin to avodah zarah, to idolatry. Parshat Sabeh is not the only Torah reading that we just completed. This was also the Shabbat before Purim, where we read Parshat Zachor, our commemoration to defeat and destroy all of our cowardly enemies. But Parshat Tetzaveh is much more about clothing, and Parshat Zachor is much more than recalling what Amalek did to us. We do not have our Beit HaMikdash, and the people of Amalek, well, no longer exist, although we're not sure anymore. But these parshiot are most relevant because they teach us the importance of justice and how we are a nation that pursues justice. Thank you, Rabbi Kelman. That was just absolutely, absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
In my daily work with those that are afflicted with the disease of addiction and their family members, judgment and stigma and shame abound. I've often wondered, and I thought it was really interesting, that if you think about little babies being born where we all started from, we are not born with shame. I have had 11 of my own babies, and I can tell you that newborn babies definitely have emotion. They can be happy, right? They have that reflexive smile, which turns into a real smile. They purr, they make those happy noises. They can be kind of irritable, just fussy, you don't really know what's going on with them, just not very happy. They can be angry, take away the food, put them in a bath and make them cold. They'll show you they're really, really angry. They can be kind of bored. And the mother and father learn to recognize those cries. And then there's that unmistakable high-pitched shriek of pain that will send any parent leaping across the room to pick up the baby and find out what's going on. But there's no shame. Babies are not born with shame. Shame is a taught emotion, most notably by parents and educators and community members. And shame usually starts to be taught, interestingly, and I like Freud, I'm not a Freudian scholar, but I do like Freud, when children start to toilet train. And things happen and we start to have these freakouts and kids just don't know what happened, what hit them, what actually went wrong here. Unprocessed shame can lead us to grow up feeling shamed. It causes us to judge others. And if it really is not taken care of, it will lead to anger and to incredible rage. When I was in Israel, I went to visit my son where he is for the year in his gap year. And they have this wonderful game room. And one of the sayings that's painted on the wall is, if you do not heal from what cut you, you will just simply bleed all over those who didn't even hurt you. I said, oh, Mayor, I like that one. I'm going to take a picture of that one. That was a good saying. When I was in my doctoral program, I had a wonderful class by a professor named Dr. Jonathan Fast. And he wrote a marvelous, powerful book called Ceremonial Violence. And in this book, Dr. Jonathan Fast studied school shooters. He actually stopped at Columbine. School shooting was not as rampant in those days as it is today. And so the last shooters that he studied were the two young men who shot up the Columbine School in Colorado and then killed themselves. What he found was that each one of those school shooters had a deep history of shame. A deep history of shame that had never been dealt with and that had turned inward into an uncontrollable rage and quest to hurt people. Recovery work is very much based on beginning to love yourself, to cut and destroy the ropes of shame and self-loathing that we were taught, perhaps in our youth, shame that followed us into our adult lives, and shame so strong and so powerful that it caused us to self-medicate with substances or behaviors that just intensified our feelings of loathing, of loneliness, and of shame. Truth be told, once upon a time before I went to social work school, I considered myself to be a fairly nice person, a benevolent, charitable person who loved to host and to help, to mother and to nurture. I spent my days caring for my own burgeoning brood while shopping and cooking and baking for the multitude of guests that we had every single Shabbat and Chag. I was the quintessential balabusta. I was full of kugel and kindness. But then my own personal world fell apart. Not one time, not two times, but three times in the span of 8 years. A very painful and public divorce with ramifications that made the local news. The illness and death of my third child, my oldest son, to cancer. And then the car accident that killed one of my granddaughters a year after my son's death actually showed me just how judgmental I had been. And that judgmental words and what judgmental words felt like in a time of incredible, searing, all-encompassing pain. Explanations, both religious and practical, came at me from well-meaning people in droves. It seemed that everybody had an opinion of what had happened, why, and what I should have done. More importantly, what I could do now to help my situation. Everything from relationship advice to religious lore and passionate instructions on how to bolster my religious observance and relationship with God to medical knowledge was thrust upon me. And I realized people judge because of their own fear and terror. When we judge others in times of despair, it makes us feel like perhaps we are in control and we can prevent whatever this malady is from affecting us. You see, our brains tell us, if you would just do X, Y, and Z, this wouldn't have happened to you. You know how I know? Because I do X, Y, and Z, and this hasn't happened to me. Judgment takes on this very bizarre form of soothing ourselves and feeling like we are protecting ourselves. We control the situation and we have all the secrets of the universe, and we're going to share it with you. I learned from pain that was so searing that it shook me to the core that there are times when words are really not helpful. There are times that the pain is so raw and so real that there are no words of explanation. And our words of supposed advice, our words of our well thought out wisdoms and cliches can actually cause a lot more suffering. So, what can we do? There's this intranet saying going across the internet now that my kids love: we listen and we do not judge. Well, yeah, we listen and we do not judge. It takes a lot of self-control to just sit there and be with someone in pain. It takes a lot of rigorous emotional honesty to say, this is really uncomfortable to be with somebody who is so upset, because it is uncomfortable. But that's what's needed. We just need to be there. Our presence, our actual energy, our ability to do, as therapists call it, hold space, to take that heavy, painful energy that someone is experiencing, literally be there to share it. Words are not necessary. We're just holding out our proverbial hands and saying, let me help carry this enormous burden. Ask people, individuals who are going through tragedy or trauma, no matter what the level of difficulty, feel like they are spinning out of control. And when we are spinning out of control, we don't have choices. Asking people, can I be helpful? Would you like me to do anything? What can I do to be helpful? Helps restore a person's sense of control. And in an article that I teach my spirituality class, we know that even the smallest of creatures and the youngest of people want to have some choice and control in their life. I once had the opportunity, I cannot remember her name, to listen to a wonderful woman who talked about her experience with being ill. She said she lived in a very small Manhattan apartment and she had an illness, which thank God she recovered from. And it was just her and her husband. Her kids were grown. She said all of a sudden, not only does she have to deal with the illness and the insurance and the appointments and this and that, but she now has 17 casseroles sitting on her counter. She's like, you know what? We don't like casserole. We don't eat casserole. And now every day when she came home from another appointment, there's a neighbor or two that dropped off this beautiful large casserole that she now has to figure out what to do. I mean, I laughed. I happen to like casserole, but only for good occasions, right? She doesn't want a casserole. Ask someone, what can I do to help you? Nothing? No problem. You have my number. Call me. I'm here. You can send a text. Here if you need me, thinking of you, sending prayers, sending hugs. People will reach out because by giving people back their autonomy, by giving them back their choice, that will restore their sense of safety. Examine your own responses to situations that make you uncomfortable. Your friend tells you about their impending divorce. Your neighbor shows obvious shame and embarrassment, talking about their child who might have an addiction. And 12-step program encourages us to what they call move a muscle. Don't commit to being the end all be all. I am now going to be the most non-judgmental person in the world, and I have now just taken every ounce of judgment I have and gotten rid of it. No, that's not realistic. Commit to making one small change. Move one muscle. Maybe engage somebody in conversation that you would have never talked to before. Maybe when you hear about a situation that makes you really uncomfortable, sit with it. Instead of responding right away and, well, you need to do this. No, you need to do this. You need to sit with that discomfort and process it with a therapist, with a mentor, with a spiritual guide, with a friend. God, it made me really uncomfortable to hear that they're getting divorced. I mean, my gosh, they've been married as long as I have. Maybe this is what's making me so uncomfortable, and that is a normal human reaction. But we need to be willing to sit with ourselves and to delve down into our emotional honesty, our intellectual and emotional honesty, and figure out what is making us uncomfortable. In an article by Rabbi Aaron Moss, he actually discusses Amalek in terms of our cynicism and says that we all have a little Amalek in us. And that little Amalek in us, whether it's cynicism or judgment or disdain, that's what we have to wipe out. No questions asked, no mercy. And finally, there was an article by Rabbi Pinchas Lipschitz that I read where he discusses the Purim story. And in the Purim story, in one of the psukim, it says, Kimu v'kiblu, the Jews fulfilled and accepted. The Gemara in Megillah says that we know that when Megillah Esther was divinely inspired from the deeper implication of the words Kimu v'kiblu, because we accepted in Shemayim what we had accepted here. on this earth. The divine nature of the Megillah cannot be derived just from Kivun B'Kiblu, because this pasuk also alludes and is a reference to how we stood and accepted the Torah at Har Sinai. And when we accepted the Torah on Har Sinai, the pasuk states, it was Ish Echad, Kalev Echad. We were one person with one heart. We were not fragmented. We were not judgmental. We all stood together to accept the Torah as one. This insight, says Rabbi Lipschitz, sheds light on why the month of Adar is one of the happiest in the Jewish calendar. What does this historical brush with our almost annihilation have to do with me today? So many things have happened to our people since that day in Shushan many thousands of years ago. Why is it that this miracle of Purim continues to be recanted and recounted and excites us so much to this day? Not only is it that many times we think the gig is up and the game is up, and that Purim shows us that no, we never give up, and that Hashem is behind orchestrating every last thing. Because Jewish history is replete with people who have wanted to destroy us. The list, unfortunately, is endless. Haskalah, the Bolsheviks, Communists, Hitler, Himmler, Eichmann, the Third Reich, Mussolini, Mufti, Idi Amin, Muammar Gaddafi, Yasser Arafat, Gamal Nasser, Sadat, Ayatollah Khamenei, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, and today Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the multitude of our enemies that our brave soldiers and our brave nation of Eretz Israel is eradicating in miraculous ways that have never been seen. And many others who have proclaimed their intent to free the world of the Jewish problem. Yet here we are. We are here. But Purim tells us actually that we can do better. We don't have the Nevi'im of Shushan. And we don't have a Mordechai Hatzadik who can point us with certainty in the right direction. But we know that we can improve in our personal and our communal lives. We're all aware, says Rabbi Lipschitz, of the issues that are swept under the rug and ignored. The times we live in demand, by the way, this article was written in 2007, that we rise above factionalism and divisiveness, superficiality and indecisiveness, and rectify our failings. Many of us remain silent as we see changes being introduced to our traditions. We sit by and we watch as hypocritical actions are performed. We shrug our shoulders and say, well, there's absolutely nothing we can do. But the story of Purim, says Rabbi Lipschitz, shows us that that's wrong. There is something we can do. We can speak up. We can right injustices. We cannot care if people mock us, like Mordechai Hatzadik, who was dressed in sackcloth and sat at the palace of the king. Kimu v'kiblu, our direct hint and remez to Ish Echad Kalev Echad. We are one person. I'd like to end with one of the instances that happened on my trip to Israel, one of the most powerful and painful and poignant instances. We went to the Nova Music Festival, where unspeakable tragedy occurred. And we had this wonderful tour guide whose name was Amit. Amit had been a tour guide previously, before October 7th, and business hasn't been so amazing. And so he now gives tours of Nova. Amit is a gentle giant. He is a towering 6 foot something, 300 plus pound man with gorgeous long black curls and a beard and a heart that's bigger than he is. Amit recounted his story of survival. He told us he had gotten permission to go to Nova. He's married with children, although not dati. Chag is chag, family time. And his wife had said, go ahead, you love this music. And he went with a group of friends. And as the chaos of the day began to unfold, as hundreds and hundreds of missiles were overhead and people were screaming and they had no idea what direction to turn, Amit looked at us, at our little group, and said, What's the first thing you would do in that situation? Nobody said anything. So he asked again, what is the first thing you would do in that situation? I ventured a guess and I said, I don't know, get out of there as quickly. I mean, run like hell, pray, like get out, get out. I mean, get out. Amit's beautiful black eyes bore straight into mine and the group, and he said, you make sure that your friends are okay before you do anything. You wouldn't leave your friends behind, would you? It was the more humbling moments I have ever experienced. And so, Amit, I dedicate this presentation to you. We do not need to be facing death and destruction to not abandon our friends. We should never emotionally abandon our friends, just like we wouldn't physically abandon them. We should not emotionally abandon our friends in any situation by casting judgment and shame on whatever circumstances they are facing. No matter what the situation, the lesson of Amit rings true. We are fortunate to be part of the greatest nation that has ever been created. We have overcome enemy after enemy after enemy. We are not just surviving, we are thriving, we are creating, we are producing. It's time for us to conquer our last enemy, and that is the enemy of fear within us. The one, that fear that causes us to hurt the ones that we love. We need to become what my colleague Sipalea Scheinberg introduced me to over the weekend. We need to become the concept of securefulness, a concept coined by Christine Forner, an expert in the world of trauma therapy. Securefulness is an individual who is 100% truly safe, an individual who always says the truth, who is authentic, who has a strong moral core, and a true sense of empathy. Perhaps add to your daily talk with your Creator a prayer that you should never consciously hurt anybody. And if you do, as 12-step implores us, make immediate amends and repair. I know that this is a tall order, but I know my people and my nation. We all have this ability, and it's not really as hard as you think. And as an added bonus, you end up feeling really, really good. Thank you all so much for Freilich and Purim. I'm Yisrael Chai.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, if ever you have 1 minute for any comments or questions, if quickly, otherwise, anybody want to say? Okay. All right, thank you, and thank you for. Okay, listen, I didn't mean for you to read my Dvar Torah. I had no idea, but okay.
It was great. Keep it
Thank
coming.
you, thank you. Okay, okay.